Okay, so we're now getting into part 3 here. One thing I should have mentioned earlier, which I didn't, so I'm going to bring it up now, is some important palettes that you'll want to make sure that you have up at all times. One is a layer palette and one is a history palette. And again, I can separate these palettes. And the thing about the history palette is it records all of the different operations that I've done. And I think it defaults to 50. You can change that in the preference panel, but I wouldn't recommend it unless your computer has a lot of memory because each of these selections do take up some memory. You also have the layer panel, and you can see Photoshop is a layer-based program. And in the layer panel, I can actually turn off my layers. I can move my layers. So now the duck is actually there, but it's underneath the top layer here. And I can move it back up like that. And I just know it's kind of important while we're working on learning the introductory tools here that you do understand this. And if this isn't showing up, you can actually set this up as a standard layout for yourself by going to Workspace, and you'll see we have Peggy's Workspace here, and basically I have it set up for layers and history. You can actually create your own as well by going New Workspace, and so whatever palettes you have up at that time will be saved, and you can name it what you'd like. And they also have some standard ones for depending on what you're working with, like if you're doing 3D or video, if you're doing painting, or if you're working strictly with photography, or you're working with a lot of text. They have the panels that you would most likely be wanting to use already set up in the standard ones here. But anyways, on our last lesson, we talked about the selection tools. And I'm not going to go in as depth with the next set of tools, but I'll just kind of give you an idea of what they do. Later on in the course, we're going to be learning about Photoshop restoration. And these tools actually work to, like, you can actually fix scratches and dust using these tools. You can actually copy areas and move them. And you can actually fix red eye with just one click, but that's for photo restoration. This next tool is the paintbrush tool. And just like the paintbrush tool, it's going to paint whatever color I have. And you can see that I just painted a stroke there. And with the paintbrush tool, you can see that I have different brushes that I can use as well. And it's kind of cool. You can kind of do all sorts of neat little brushes. You can change the size of a brush right here, or as I told you before, you can also change it by going next to your letter P and the bracket keys, and you can increase or decrease the size of your brush that way as well. Also, whenever you have a panel in your option bar that comes down like this, you have another drop-down menu that exists, and we can actually add brushes to our selection. So I could go, I want some thick and heavy brushes. Well, the one thing you want to remember if you're going to be adding more options into any of these panels is that you don't want to click OK, because what it'll do is it will get rid of the default ones. What you want to do is append it, and you will add to it. And so you can see that it added different brushes for you. So it's kind of cool. And then you have the pencil tool, which draws in straight lines. You can actually replace colors, and the mixer brush tool is used when you get into painting in Photoshop, which is a further assignment. The clone stamp tool is used in restoration as well, and it actually copies an area. Now, to use the clone stamp tool correctly, you have to hold down an option key and a bullseye comes up. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this area. And what you see You can see it actually shows me the area I copied. Now watch what happens when I start painting. I actually am drawing out the whole photo. But the problem with that is it's just going to keep drawing out that photo. If I want to just do a specific area, I have to unclick the Align Sample in my Options panel, and then every time I start over, it's going to start at the beginning. You also have a pattern stamp tool, and again, it's going to give you samples of patterns that you can use, and you can also as well add to these patterns by appending. Okay, you got rocks, etc. So kind of cool. Okay, then you have your history brush tool and art history brush tool. We won't be getting into that in this course. We have our eraser tool, and that basically will erase part of your image. The thing is, you want to make sure you're on the layer that you want to do the erasing on as well. We have the paint bucket tool, and it will default to the gradient tool. And the gradient, again, gives you various options, and again, you can append by adding more. And the gradient tool works in such a way that you can do a gradient. I could make a selection and then go back to the gradient tool and do a gradient within that selection. I can also change the type of gradients I have by going up to the options panel. I got an angle gradient here. Then we have this horizontal gradient tool. And then you have the star, I believe it's called. Okay, so different ways you can do the gradient tool. This tool here is blur, sharpen, and smudge. In the selection tool panel, which we'll get into in a different unit, we have what we call a refine edge tool, and it allows us to do feathering and smoothing of our edges. And before we had that, we used these tools quite a bit. We don't really use them very often anymore. This tool here is a dodge tool. What the dodge tool will do is it actually you can increase your exposure, and it's not going to show up very well on here. Let's go over to here. I'll get onto the photo layer here, and basically the dodge tool will actually, I should say, decrease exposure. You can see that it's lightening things up. Okay, and then you have your burn tool, and that will actually darken things up. And again, you can switch the exposures here. Make sure I get back on that layer here, and you can see we're darkening it up. But if I go to a higher exposure, you can see that I can darken it up quite a bit. And then the last tool in this section is the sponge tool, and this is useful. This will let me desaturate or saturate, so I can actually desaturate an area, making it less color, make more black and white, desaturating, taking the color out. And I can also saturate by making the color more vibrant. So that is the painting tools as we refer to them. And then we have our vector tools. Now again, we will be getting into activities where you're going to be creating vector shapes, and this is when we'll be using the pen tool. We won't get into that right now, but basically, well, we'll show you quickly. Basically what the pen tool will do is allow you to make shapes. Oops, excuse me here. So I can go ahead and make a shape. I can give it an outline, etc. Okay. We also have the text tool, and with the text tool, of course, we are able to add text to our document. And again, in the options panel, you can go ahead and type. Okay, we'll make that black here. And you can also change the color in the options panel here. You have left align, right align, sharp edges, crisp edges, smooth edges, etc. I can change the size of the font here. I can change the style of the font as well. And some of the fonts that you select will also allow you to have like bold options and italic options as well. So that would be in this area right here. And the text tool as well, not only can you work with the options panel, you can also do 3D with the text. And I'm going to create a 3D layer. And now you see that we have the text in 3D. And if I go ahead and move on and move, this wasn't probably the best text to use, but you can do various 3D operations as well. Okay, and the path selection tool and the direct selection tool correlate with the pen tool up here. And then we have our custom shapes tools. These are vector based, and again I can make a shape, give it a color. I can also give it a stroke. I can change the size of the stroke. I can also change the type of stroke I give it. And I can tell it not to have a stroke, and I can tell it not to have a color. And sometimes we use these paths when we're doing text writing. Let's say I wanted to write text around my path here. I could go to my text tool, and now I can go ahead and type around the box. So that's how that works. Okay. The other thing we can do too is in the shape tool, we've got rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, and align tool. But the last one here is custom shape tool. And in custom shape tool, up here, I have all these different shapes. Now, when you open up this, you're not going to see all these shapes. And what you will need to do is click on the upper right-hand corner, and you're going to go to all. And that will give you all of these images here. And then again, you'll want to append. And then you can select whatever shape you want and drag it down, and again change the colors, etc., and add strokes if you want. The hand tool is very useful when I'm in zoom in mode, especially when I'm doing selections, and I can move my image around. I can also do this if I'm, let's say, making a selection with a selection tool, and I get to a point where I want to go further. I can hold down my space bar and the hand will come up, and then when I let go of the space bar, I can resume with my tool selection. So magnifying glass we've already talked about, and we've pretty much explained what we have here. So anyways, that is a very quick overview of what is available in Photoshop. We're going to be working on various activities such as colorization, merging photos, photo restoration, making collages, and you will be using various tools for the operations and learn them more in depth as we go on. So that's the end of this presentation.